Good morning. I hope everybody had a safe trip in, and welcome to the Pauly Jail Seminar at Steel Cell of North America. We want to welcome everybody here. We thank you for coming. This is going to be a great event. My name is Tony Turpin. I'm with CGL Companies, and it's sad to say, but I've been working in this environment in the corrections field for 45 years. I started when I was 2, just so you know. But it's a pleasure for me to moderate this event. I think that you're going to have an opportunity to learn a lot of things today. And of course, I want to welcome those that are here, but also welcome those that are online. We have folks that are participating at their work sites or their offices throughout the country, and we want to welcome those people as well, because the information that you will receive today, I think, will be very beneficial in a lot of different ways, particularly those that are here. Your ability to see, touch, feel, ask questions about the technology, the products, the services. That's just one of the benefits of being at an event like this. The other is your ability to network, to meet people that are actually invested in our industry, invested in our profession, who have valid passions about the world of corrections, jails, and prisons. So you'll get to meet those people and network and come to know very important people within the industry. Also, the knowledge that you gain. One of the things that if folks are interested in building a jail, or if you're interested in adding on, retrofitting, you're having problems, just the knowledge that you can take away from an event like this is immeasurable. And it gives you and arms you with information that you need to make good, sound decisions. There are a lot of questions in the times that how much does it cost? What are the tariffs? All those kind of things are questions that are valid that folks here can give you good answers to. So I encourage you to ask questions when needed. A little housekeeping stuff for the restrooms. This door at the end of the building, if you go out, there's some construction going on out there, so put on your hard hat if you have to go to the bathroom. But no, it's right out that door. And also we have restrooms. If you go to the rear of this building, you'll see the modular units there for restrooms. Any architects that need to register their AIA credits, I think the table is as you come in. Please make sure that you do that little housekeeping stuff, and we're all good. And so with that, let's start the program. Everybody ready? All right. Our first speaker. Here he comes. Is Major General Mark Inch. And I have these cards to read, and I'm going to read this stuff, but Mark is a good friend as well. He is a corrections professional for many years. He served, and I call him secretary, he served as Florida's 12th Secretary of Corrections. He completed 40 years of public service. He's semi-retired, focusing on the family, prison ministry, which is very important to him, reentry efforts, and advancing the corrections profession as an author, speaker, consultant, and mentor. Major General Inch previously held significant roles in the U.S. Army, including the Provost Marshal General, Commanding General of the Criminal Investigation Command, and Executive Manager of the Defense Forensics and Biometrics Agency. He also served as the 9th Director of the Federal Bureau of Prisons from 2017 to 2018, overseeing 122 facilities, 39,000 staff, and 186,000 incarcerated persons. On top of that, he's just a great person, an interesting speaker, a wealth of knowledge. Let's welcome Major General Mark Inch.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it. Well, thank you all. It's great to be back. How many of you here were here at last year's training conference? So for those that were here, that was the first time I came, and Joe, thank you for the invite to come back again. We talked about designing hope, and kind of the sub-message behind last year was, how do you communicate to a secretary, recognizing that your brains are probably different than the secretary's brain. You know, the idea that, this might actually work, there we go. I think most of your brains being out of the engineering, design, architect, construction, I see your brain as the lower right-hand corner there. Unfortunately, mine is the one in the upper right-hand corner. It's a mess. It's tiring. And it is hard to communicate. And I figured I had completely missed the boat last year until I got invited to come back again. I says, okay, then, well, let's build on that theme. Apparently, there was some aspect of communication of how you make the physical fit within kind of a general systems theory, so I buy into general systems theory, social culture. But I figured this time I got to get to know you a little better. So this is participative. Everybody at home on the web, just raise your hand when it's your time. Let me get to know you better. I want to find out, where do you feel the most peaceful, where you're you just, assuming you have feelings, that you feel this is where I would want to be. You know, if we sing God Bless America together, you know, we're going to go mountains, prairie, oceans. But if you could go anywhere, who goes to the mountains? Just show of hands. And to the prairie, oh, one. To the oceans, I'm not going to sing it, there you go. How about to the old growth woods with babbling books? Okay, so interesting that we have the mountains, the dichotomy, the mountains and the sea. You know, that played out in where I decided to retire, because I find my peace in the mountains, and my wife finds her peace at the beach. So we compromised, and I live 1 mile from the beach. So just kind of how it works. How about architecture, though? Where do you like to live? So who's an urbanite here? You just the condo down in the city. Okay, I see one hand. All right. How about the English cottage, idyllic, out away from everybody, isolationist? Couple hands there. Okay. So who would like that house in the lower left-hand corner? That's actually one of Joe's guest house. He bought that with the first change order for Westville. Yeah, there we go. Who would like to live in that? Who could afford to live in that? So actually, see that house in the lower right? It's for sale. 1.8. I will give a special deal to anybody who in this conference makes a decision to buy that house. Santa Rosa Beach, Florida, 1 mile from the beach. Just saying. Okay. You know, we all have our ideal of where we want to live, you know, both the environment around it, but the actual structure, because we do emotionally connect. Well, this next slide, I don't want you to necessarily participate in it, but if you put yourself in the position of one of our incarcerated, where do you think you would best find well-being, short of being released? Are you a traditionalist? Do you love the upper left there with the tier style? I kind of love that, because I worked at the old United States disciplinary barracks in the old castle, and I found meaning in that. But probably not if I was an inmate. Would you like to travel overseas and maximize, apparently, housing per space there in the upper right? I think we can all guess where that is. Or you start noticing newer construction styles that are prevalent, and I think some that we'll be discussing today. Put yourself in one of the audiences or multiple audiences as we start discussing, because I think that's an aspect of discussion for today. Because who you ask does make a difference. You know, the correctional officer is going to look at what is seen around us with the practice eye of custody. They're going to, I look behind myself, and I see the cutouts of where the locking system goes. And since I'm really familiar with Willow products, I envision, the wedge going into that cutout. I don't know if they are or not, but if you're talking to somebody that thinks custody, those are the kind of things you're talking to. If you're talking with the incarcerated population, the paint palettes make a difference. The toilet, the writing desk, the size of cell, the size of window. Is there a window? How's the lighting? Does the lighting change? There's all this plays out. If you're talking to the mental health professional, which we are certainly going to get a presentation on that today. I certainly know my friends over there at NAFCare, Trent and Michelle, the environment they want for the people when they do comprehensive health care, the environment makes a big difference on recruiting, but effectiveness of delivery of services. And then there's the legislators. What are they looking for? How many people have PTSD dealing with legislative bodies? I know I do. There, Tony hands goes up, and with others, you find in that body some of them will have their view of corrections. Will go all the way back to, a punitive model, and they're actually looking, how austere, how dank, how drab. How soul-sucking can we make the environment? And they only want to fund that. Where there's a lot of education that has to go along with, with the legislature to get the funding and the approval of designs depending on how the state works. But who you ask makes a difference. I want to introduce the concept of sense of place. One of the things I did in the military, it was kind of a surprise as a senior captain. I was sent off to graduate school to get a master's degree in geography, so as to go back to the military academy for 3 years and teach physical and human geography. One of the things that fascinated me was that when I was at the University of Texas at Austin, was a subfield of geography called sense of place. And it's the study of the physical, but you're looking at the emotional connection to the physical. We pulled up those slides of the mountains and the prairie and the ocean. Where is it that you actually want to be and lay down and stick your sand in the feet in the sand, or lay down by a babbling brook? Where do you make that? What is the physical place where you make that emotional connection that engenders well-being? Because it's real. You all know that's real. Even the most analytical person in this room, and I know we have them, there are certain places where you just stop and your eyes actually come up and you go, wow. Like, I could build a house right here, or maybe I just want to stop and stand right here and feel what I'm feeling. Or you go into structures. Now, has anybody ever gone into the Library of Congress in DC? Not the typical tourist spot. Next time you're in DC, go to the Library of Congress and see the architecture. It just will blow you away. That's sense of place. Why some people like to live up on a hill, other people like to live wherever. So do we have a sense of place in a prison environment? History might tell us maybe not. When you think of some of our very traditional building designs, let's take from the 1930s on, I don't think the concept of well-being was necessarily baked into the model. Custody sure was. Lines of sight, maximizing space. But just think of the, now I got to separate, those that have worked their life in corrections that probably feel very comfortable, walking a tier. But for most, it's a very oppressive feeling, hearing a gate clang behind you. Going in knowing that for the next 12 hours you are sitting in that cell. or for those in special housing units, even longer. But there was an actual desire for the construction to exude security, even as a deterrent effect, right? I mean, to be effective, but also just as a deterrent, the best way to stop and escape is making sure nobody even tries it in the first place, yeah? And so the visual cues really, reinforced all that which is opposite of freedom, which we so value. Because, frankly, incarceration is society's retribution, strong term, retribution for crime against victims of crime and against society as a victim itself. Just think of the cost of crime. So there's a big discussion going on about introducing normalcy into a correctional environment. I'm sorry, there's nothing normal really about being incarcerated, that deprivation of liberty. It is a awesome, not like cool awesome, awesome like heavy awesome punishment to take somebody's freedom. I mean, frankly, we live a lot in life having aspects of freedom. Wasn't high school oppressive and we had boundaries? Certainly me in the military, especially overseas. Yeah, I lived behind fences. We value that desire to be out free, especially the American culture. But have we really, and I'm hoping today you're going to see, yes, people do think about this, try to create a physical environment within our prisons in which there can be an emotional bond and meaning that leads to a feeling of well-being, or at least that it influences well-being. Because I would argue that is important for mental health treatment, even though I'm not a mental health professional. But to see where this really, I think, fits in, and the argument I want to make to you is this is a holistic argument. If you look at the traditions of corrections, if you go into all the, if you take a master's in criminal justice and corrections, my undergraduate degree is biblical archaeology, so take this for what it's worth. But, the traditional reasons, of course, is on the justice side is retribution, so that's punishment for past crime, incapacitation, that is, while somebody's incarcerated, they should not be able to victimize someone else, be it staff or other inmates or anybody on the outside for that matter in the facility, and then deterrence for future crime. So that's kind of the one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is rehabilitation. Now, I add restoration, and I'll explain why I add that whenever I talk about the purposes of corrections. We know with rehabilitation that in the time where men and women are in our custody and care, we should take advantage of that time to put them on a better track than they were on when they made that very poor decision that brought them to us. And for some, it takes a lot of work. Could be a lot of cognitive behavioral health care required, substance use treatment. For others, and it's not either or, for others, vocational training, education. Florida, the average reading level of a newly incarcerated inmate in Florida is 6th grade. And 32% of them read at a 5th grade or lower level. Gosh, it's hard to succeed in society with that, right? So there's that role of rehabilitation. And I would argue that starts day one with the correctional officer right at cell front and the environment that we work at. Restoration, personal view, is that correctional agencies should work with intent with community to help with the reentry efforts. And I think, again, this aspect plays out with our discussions today. So here's my thesis for today. Prisons and jails that create an environment that feels connected and supportive, not just secure, would positively impact inmates' mental health, especially those with mental health challenges, to aid in healing, rehabilitation, and restoration to our communities. That's my thesis to you for today. It makes sense to me that we acknowledge sense of place as something real, even though it's an emotional feeling connection, but that there should be some way that we can measure that and address that, or at least make that inform our decisions on the physical environment. And to do so would be beneficial. And I just had to throw biophilic design in there just because that sounded like such a cool thing. So that's, yes, natural light, plants, and all that good stuff. That spoke to me. But then the whole debate on security versus creating an environment. Some use the word normalizing. I tend not to use that word. I'd rather just use the term supportive or fostering well-being. That they're actually complementary. They're not either or. Though in some cases, you're probably thinking, I have another slide, which I don't, because this is where you all come in. People think this is, if I were to continue this talk, I'd now be talking about the Norway model of construction. And I'm really not. And in fact, if I were back in my secretary role and you came in and you said, this is an example of the Norway model, buy it, that would actually turn me off. I would want to understand the reasoning, and again, I think that's going to play out real well today, understanding the reason behind the design, behind the architecture, of where it supports the rehabilitation, the restoration of our inmates. So, I'm excited about what I'm going to hear today because I get smarter every time I attend a conference like this. Again, I appreciate the invitation to come back again with you all today, and I will be followed by probably Tony again. Excellent.